I think I have some controversial opinions, so I'm kind of scared to make this video. But reading is so subjective, and so I wanted to talk about some of the books that other people seem to love. They seem to be very popular on the internet that just didn't hit it for me, and I just personally did not like. Again, reading is subjective. I'm not saying these are bad books, I'm just saying they didn't work for me, and that's okay. We can have different taste. The first one on this list is Divine Rivals, which was everywhere at one point. I remember seeing this popping off literally everyone I knew. And honestly, this is the fantasy book for romance lovers. If you like contemporary romance, you could like this. As a fantasy reader, the plot was flimsy, the world building was flimsy, and the relationship was even flimsier in my opinion. But, I don't know. I truly was just so bored in this book. There were some cool concepts, but they never got like developed enough for me to enjoy them. And I feel like everyone sold this as rivals to lovers. They're rivals working as journalists and they're like competing against each other. They're rivals for about 2 chapters and then they're not. They don't work there anymore. And like, that's not rivals to lovers. Don't give me 40 pages of 350 pages, I don't know how long this book is, and tell me it's a rivals to lovers story. It's not. They were clearly companions throughout this, not rivals. Like, the romance happens, and she doesn't even know it's her rival. So I digress. I did not like this. Honestly, I was bored. That's the number one thing I can say about this. I was bored, and I did not understand how everyone loved it, but people do love it. A lot of people. Next up, we have The Never King. When I read this, I thought I just didn't like Why Choose. But since then, I've read a few Why Choose, and I realized I really do like Why Choose. I just didn't like the story, and this type of story. This is a Peter Pan Lost Boys retelling. This woman gets kidnapped by the Lost Boys, and to get out, she sleeps with them all. Can I say that with a straight face? Because that's literally what happens. I just felt like it didn't handle the trauma of being kidnapped very well. I have read some kidnapped romances before, and I just feel like this one was like a switch flipped. Like, she's kidnapped, and like the next day she's like, I'm gonna sleep with them, and they're gonna let me out. And I just feel like that didn't make sense. There was none of this like scared girl that like was just kidnapped, and these men are like, could do ruthless things to her. So that just really didn't work for me. I just felt like it was smut for the sake of smut, which again works for a lot of people. A lot of people just love to read smut. I personally don't. I wanted a lot more plot. I was told there's plot in this, and then the plot happens within probably the last like 30 pages. Like, there's not a lot of plot. And so it didn't work for me. And thinking about this story, I can't believe I read it. I can't believe I didn't just DNF it. This one is less popular, but the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. After reading Serpent and the Wings of Night and loving that entire like story world, everyone said that Daughter of No Worlds was better. Specifically, people on TikTok, I feel like, scream about this series. Daughter of No Worlds, the entire series, I read all 3, was a slog for me to get through. That doesn't mean it's bad. I read it for a book club, and 2 of us hated it, 2 of us loved it. Mixed reviews. I just felt like there was no substance to their relationship or to the main characters. They existed to be only this one item of them. She wanted revenge. He wanted to care for her. And there was nothing else to their personalities besides those 2 things. I like my characters to just feel a little bit more defined to me than that. And honestly, I felt like the world building just kept expanding, but I didn't really have a full grasp about everything, how the magic worked, essentially. Like, I feel like she could just do whatever she wanted to at whatever times. And considering the first book is about training her, it felt really weird that we didn't get to see like a really good progression of her magic. I just feel like there's like a little butterfly, and then there was a holy crap a lot of butterflies, and there was no like medium amount of butterflies. I am curious about people who love Daughter of No Worlds or Serpent and the Wings of Night, which one they read first. I read Serpent first, and I wonder if that matters, but I don't think I would have tried Serpent if I had read Daughter first, because I just really didn't vibe with it, and it just felt a little murky and messy. But that one I feel like fits more Throne of Glass vibes, and Serpent fits more ACOTAR vibes, and I am also an ACOTAR girly over Throne of Glass. After that, we have another big popular indie, Savage Lands. I hate read this. I had a great time hate reading this, but this was too raunchy for me. I am learning that I do not like raunchy stories. I felt like this, every second word that came out of this book was something raunchy. I would say the romance is probably slow burn. I don't remember if we saw the romance in the first book, which also could be why I didn't love it. I feel like so many scenes were just meant to like disturb me because she's in a prison and it's bad and dirty there. I just wanted more substance to my story than that. I wanted a little bit more plot. I wanted a little bit more romance. I didn't care just to see disturbing, smuttier scenes. or just hearing about how everyone wants to stick something in her every 5 seconds. Like, I was so bored by that, and I remember just like really hating this narration style because of that. So yeah, this one did not work for me. It's also a little bit urban. It is set in our world, but there's like a divide. I also don't typically love when things are set in our world, so there's also that, because I find I think this is set in Budapest. Hearing Budapest constantly distracts me. Like hearing Toronto. Weird. I like things to be in a magical world in my head, which is why I don't read contemporary. Similar vein to Savage Lands, The Coven. This book gave me the ick. Kind of really bad. I hated this. There are some really raunchy scenes in this that did not work for me and made me feel uncomfy. I'm not saying this book is bad. I'm not saying these things are disturbing, but they personally just didn't work for me and made me feel this way. I know people who loved this book and had a great time with it, just not for me. But like, there is a scene I directly remember about her not having any underwear on to give easier access to this person that she didn't want to do anything with. And I didn't love that. I truly didn't. I didn't like the way the sex scenes were done, and I just hated the guy. He was disturbing and icky to me. And once a guy gives you the ick in a story, I feel like it's so hard to not get the ick. And so once I had the ick really early on, I was out. I probably should have DNF'd it, but I didn't, and I kind of regret it because I don't have fond memories of reading that one. At least with Savage Lands, I had fond memories of just like giggling at how much I hated it. The Coven made me uncomfortable. Wasn't my vibe. But there's always really pretty editions of The Coven. I don't think I want to say the next one. I feel like people are gonna come for me for it. A Shadow in the Ember. Listen, I am a From Blood and Ash lover. I loved From Blood and Ash and the second book. We don't talk about the later books. We don't have to even think that they exist. But the first 2 books, I loved. 5 stars. So I was excited to read A Shadow in the Ember, especially after what happened with the rest of From Blood and Ash. I was like, okay, we're starting over. Good. I didn't expect us to literally just start over. This is the same book. I literally think that the 2 characters from Blood and Ash are the same characters in A Shadow in the Ember. The personalities were exactly the same, the banter exactly the same. They just had different magic. They were in a different time. I just was like, okay, I didn't need a copycat book. I wanted a new experience, a new journey that added to the journeys later on. I do think that this series is more loved than From Blood and Ash now. I hear a lot of good things. I've only read the first book. I will not be continuing on though, because I was incredibly bored by Shadow in the Ember because, well, I've seen this film before. I read this book in From Blood and Ash. It's not that like they're copycat one for ones, but the vibes were exactly the same. And having an author write the same vibe books sucks because they're so easily comparable, and I wanted different vibes. I wanted something to change. I didn't want it to feel like I could just insert those characters and swap them and the stories would be the same. I didn't love that one, but a lot of people do. I'm so sorry to my comment section if it's flooded with people that are mad at me now. Next up, we have The Witch Collector. I gave this book 2 stars, and honestly, I don't remember a single thing anymore. And I think that that says a lot about it. I see people raving about this book and loving it. I can't even tell you why I didn't like it anymore, because I don't remember a single thing. It has left my brain. It's gone forever. I know it was cold, and that's it. Like, I literally cannot tell you a single thing about this book, but I didn't like it, and this shows. Ooh, another really, really big one. The Plated Prisoner series. I've read the first 2 books. I did not continue on into the 3rd book. I remember really liking the first book. And the second book, I just felt like so little happened until the very end reveal, and I didn't care, and I was bored. I think I was having problems like being invested into the characters and what was going on. I feel like it personally probably didn't work for me because the love interest doesn't come into play until later on, and by that point, I was bored, and I picked it up for the romance, not the fantasy. So I was like, where is the romance in the first 2 books? People are like, oh, slow burn. I don't think it counts as a slow burn if they just don't meet for 600 pages. A slow burn is about the tension and like the vibes of them, like will they, won't they? Not that they don't know each other. That's not slow burn. That's like me saying that my boyfriend was slow burn for 17 years because I just didn't meet him until I was in high school. No, we weren't slow burn. We ended up together right away. I don't have much to say. I read this one a really long time ago. So that's pretty much all. I don't really have like hatred feelings for this one. It just is a book that I read and it exists and I will continue. Ooh, this one might be controversial because I DNF'd it. Trials of the Sun Queen. I think I DNF'd this 60% in. This was just flimsy. Like, I feel like there was no reasoning behind a lot of things happening. Like, the king started helping her and I was like, what is going on? Why are you just helping her? Why did they even pull her out of this thing? I didn't get behind the actual plot of this, and so I just didn't care. And I remember being really annoyed by our main character too. I remember people saying it was like the Hunger Games meets The Selection, and me just thinking it was 100% The Selection, not anything cool about the Hunger Games. dreams. It just gave me like girls wearing dresses and tiaras and there was no plot happening. So I DNF'd this one. I know it's been getting a lot of love as it's been traditionally picked up and people are loving it, but it did not work for me. Ooh, maybe this one's my most controversial, but When the Moon Hatched. This one was a combination of things. Far too long in my opinion. The main characters had no chemistry, and that's partially due to the amnesia trope that is in this. The amnesia trope made her not remember things and him remember things, and so their romance always felt awkwardly sided, and I didn't understand their connection because I didn't get to see their connection be formed, and I definitely like to see connections be formed on pages. I'm an enemies to lovers. I don't really like a friends to lovers or anything like that because I just like to believe it. I feel like I need to see it, which could be not the best trait, but it is a trait I have, and I hated the writing style. I can't lie. I had to reread so many lines in this story. The writing style just did not work for me, and I hated that she didn't explain things properly. She would explain how we walked across the grass and every blade of grass swayed this way and then this blade swayed that way, and it would be like this long in-depth definition of how the blades of grass swayed, and then she'd say a word for a dragon and you'd have to go look up that word in the glossary to know what it meant. And I understood that she was doing this because like people in this world would just know that that meant dragon, but I as the reader did not, so I needed you to explain it a little bit better because I don't want to have to look in a glossary. I want it to be explained in a novel, and I think that that is the duty of an author, to make things make sense to me, to make this world that you've written and created feel alive in my head, and having to flip to a glossary does not make me feel that way. It makes me feel like I'm reading a textbook. But that's a hot take because When the Moon Hatched is so loved. So maybe I should just keep my mouth shut about that one. I would love to know what book didn't work for you that worked for a lot of other people. As I said earlier, reading is subjective. These are my thoughts and opinions. None of these are bad books. They're just books that didn't work for me. And if you'd like to know some books that really did work for me, here is a fantasy romance recommendation list. And if you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me a devil emoji. And have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.